So now we have the opportunity to hear from Gary Hoover, and Gary grew up in Anderson, Indiana. He began his entrepreneurial journey at a very young age, and he was convinced that the best way to change the world was through entrepreneurial enterprise. And so he started subscribing to Fortune magazine at the age of 12, and while other kids were out playing baseball, he was visiting as a youngster the corporate headquarters of businesses. And his question was always the same: what separates the business winners from business losers? And so that has been the launch pad for an amazing career in which Gary has been someone who has launched businesses, he has created jobs, he has sold those businesses, launched other businesses, and along the way he has provided tremendous information to other business people, other entrepreneurs, information that many of us depend on every day of the week. At the age of 30, he took the plunge and created the pioneering book superstore, Bookstop, which helped change the nature of book shipping in America. And that was sold to Barnes & Noble for $41.5 million cash when it was only a 7-year-old business. Became the cornerstone for their industry-dominating superstore chain. Then after he and his partner sold Bookstop, Gary returned to his first love of understanding and studying businesses. And in 1990, he began a small business information publisher called The Reference Press. That eventually evolved into Hoover's, and Hoover's today is a service that many of us rely on, and it is now part of Dun & Bradstreet. Gary lives in Austin. He has a 50,000 book personal library, and he is going to speak to us today. He's also got another speaking opportunity in Round Rock this evening, and he'll be mentioning that as well. But please join me in giving a great Round Rock welcome to Gary Hoover.
Can everybody hear me all right? Can you hear me all right? I think the acoustics are good enough in here. It's great to be here. I've got a lot of things to say, so I'll try to blow through them in like 35 or 40 minutes. So I think the last time I had any formal relationship with Round Rock is I sat in on a strategic planning meeting with the mayor and the management of the city in about 1985 or 1986. So I guess I must have given them some pretty good advice, because Round Rock's done okay since 85. Anyway, let me start out and put a little flesh on all that stuff that Doug talked about. I grew up in a town, Anderson, Indiana. It was a General Motors factory town. And Anderson had 60,000 people living there. 27,000 worked for General Motors. So GM was like life itself. And I'm sitting there in the classroom, and the teachers are talking about Civil War history and how one general did one thing and a colonel did this, and which strategy worked, which strategy didn't work. They're talking about leadership styles, about FDR and President Hoover and Coolidge and Lincoln and everybody, how they made decisions, how they led people and all that. And it was all fascinating. And I held up my hand and said, well, this is cool, learning about strategies and leadership, about all these presidents and generals, kings and queens, whatever. What about General Motors? You know, they're like the big dog here in town. And a teacher said, oh, they make Chevrolet, Pontiac, Buick, Oldsmobile, Cadillac. I said, no, I understand that. Who started it? Why did they start it? Who runs it today? Are they smart people or stupid people? You know, we may assume that the people that run Fortune 500 companies are all smart, but all you have to do is look at Bear Stearns at Bank of America, you know, to realize that JP Morgan last week, a couple of weeks ago, to realize, well, they may have high IQs, they may have a lot of degrees behind their name, but they may not really be smart in the broadest sense of the word. So anyway, so I was dying to learn about General Motors, and nobody could tell me what I needed to know. And I was in a newsstand with my family, and my sister's looking at the horse and dog magazines, my brother's looking at the airplane and car magazines, and there's a magazine called Fortune. And it was the issue, the 500 biggest companies in America, which they publish every spring or early summer. And I opened it up, and the number one in the list was General Motors. It was 50% bigger than any other company on earth. And I said, wow, here are these journalists trying to figure out the same kind of, they're asking the same questions I'm asking. what makes her a great enterprise? What makes her successful ones, failed ones? And I went running to my parents and said, man, this is the coolest magazine I've ever seen. You've got to get me a subscription to this magazine. And they're like, oh, you weird kid. You know, whatever. Anyway, I got my subscription, and when the new Fortune 500 arrived in my mailbox a week ago today, it was the 50th year in a row that I've grabbed the Fortune 500 and run to my room and gone down through all 500 companies to see who's up, who's down, and trying to figure out why. So I really became fascinated with big business, but what I really talk about these days, and I was entrepreneur in residence at the McCombs Business School at UT Austin a couple of years ago. I now teach on my own. I have a 12-week course in entrepreneurial thinking. I passed out my business cards. If you didn't get one, I have plenty more. They got links to my Hoover's World website. But as I've gone through life, I've really become fascinated more and more with enterprises. And when I say enterprise, I mean any time you've got a group of people who have a shared vision, who have common goals. So actually, the most successful corporation, I worked for 3 Fortune 500 companies. I did 4 startups, 2 succeeded, 1 failed, 1 got halfway there. But of all the corporations that have touched my life, actually the most successful, I believe, is the University of Chicago, which I studied economics there with Milton Friedman and some of those other guys. And it's a 100-year-old outfit. It was very revolutionary when it was founded. They created it from, with John Rockefeller, the oil guy's money, and said, we're going to build a great university almost overnight. And they started like 300 years behind Harvard. And as of today, they've had more Nobel Prize winners as teachers and students than any other university on earth. So enterprises, whether it's your church, your university, your community, your chamber of commerce, or Dell, or General Motors, or Google, or Facebook, it's about people working together to try to do something they couldn't do working individually. And so I've been fascinated by that all along. And from all my studies, and when we started Hoover's, I don't have anything to do with Hoover's anymore. We went public and then it was sold. That gave me the chance to look at thousands more enterprises all over the world. And from that, I've come up with a list of 8 things that I think are the keys to building and leading great enterprises. And I think they apply to any industry, any place on earth of any size. And rather than using PowerPoint, it's on the back of the cards I handed out. So, and I'm going to run through those 8 things as quickly as I can, and hopefully have time for a little Q&A, whatever works for you folks. The first thing on my list is curiosity. And I believe that a strong sense of curiosity really underlies all success, certainly success in business. And where I first saw this was in the process of developing my first startup, Bookstop. Soon after I fell in love with business, I fell in love with retailing. My 8th grade term paper was a life story of Marshall Field, the great Chicago merchant. And I said, wow, he had a real interesting life. He made a good living. He created 10,000 jobs in one building alone. The big State Street store at Marshall Fields. Now it's called Macy's, like about everything else, but it's still up there on State Street in Chicago. He brought all this cool stuff from all over the world for people to see and buy if they wanted to. Was a good citizen of the community, and it sounds really interesting. Now, I'm always teaching my students to do your homework, to go out and really research, to try to become as much of an industry expert as is humanly possible. So at the age of 13 or 14, I was out there hanging out at the, what were then the big stores in town, JCPenney, Sears Roebuck, Montgomery Ward, and asking to see the manager, or going to locally owned, independent, mom-and-pop stores and asking to see the owner, and trying to find out, would I enjoy retailing and would I be good at it? So I'd ask these people, you know, what's the best day you've ever had as a retailer? What's the worst day you've ever had? What's hard about it? What's easy about it? What do you look for in a good retailer? What do you try to avoid? And just trying to get my hands around it. As I went through that process, I came to the conclusion, yeah, I think I'm going to like to go into retailing, and it's still my favorite industry and the one closest to my heart. Well, as time went on, I realized I wanted to start my own chain. And as a startup entrepreneur, I believe you have to look 15 to 20 years into the future. Because no matter what you start, it's going to take between 5 and 10 years to get it up off the ground and running. I mean, even if you look at Facebook, I'm pretty sure the number is it's 8 years old. So, you know, even the things we think of as being overnight successes, still, they take some time to get up and running. And the thing is, you can't build up a business and say, oh, it's going to be cooking at year 7, and then I'm going to sell it or take it public, and then year 8 it's going to go broke because it'll be over with. It's got to have legs, so you've got to be looking out 15 to 20 years. So I was sitting there in the 1970s trying to foresee the 80s and 90s and trying to figure out what kind of retail store I wanted to start. And the first thing I saw was a new breakthrough technology in retailing. And when I say technology, I mean any better way of doing things. Milton Friedman in class used to talk about maybe the most impressive technology of the late 20th century, the way that chickens are raised. What Pilgrim's Pride and Tyson and all those people do dramatically lower the cost of nutrition and protein for people all over the world. So big breakthrough technology. It isn't just computers, hardware, software, and everything, even though here in Austin we may tend to think that. And so the new breakthrough technology in retailing was the superstore. Invented in the late 1950s by Charles Lazarus at the store called Toys R Us in Washington, D.C. And what Lazarus did is he said, look, I'm going to take a category of merchandise. I'm going to be a specialty store. I'm not going to be a general merchandise store like Macy's or Walmart or Target or Sears. He picked toys and games and all that. And in that category, I'm going to carry a huge selection of goods and have low prices. Well, today we're covered in a world of superstores. The biggest superstore organization ever built is called Home Depot. Lowe's, Best Buy, Bed Bath & Beyond, on and on. There weren't any superstores back then. And when people heard this idea of his, they thought it would never work. And I teach my students, if you have an idea for a business and you tell all your friends and they say, that's a great idea, I wish I thought of that, you probably don't have a good idea. 99% of the time, they're going to be laughed out of the room if you really have an idea that's a challenge to copy and people don't see the need before it's coming. Henry Ford is quoted saying something like, if I had given my customers what they wanted, I would have built a faster horse. You know? So people don't always know. Nobody was walking around saying, I can't live another day without Federal Express, or I can't live another day without PowerPoint, or whatever. And so the reason people didn't think the superstore would work is because if you're going to carry a big selection of goods, because the idea of a superstore, big selection and low prices. And if you're going to carry a big selection of goods, you're going to have to charge higher prices because you've got to finance that inventory. Or, if you're a discounter, you carry very few items. That's a cardinal rule of discount retailing, is you cherry pick. The average Costco store carries 4,000 items. The average Walmart Supercenter carries 140,000 items. And yet, the average Costco does almost twice the revenue of the average Walmart Supercenter. So whatever that works out to, 100 times as much revenue per item. So if you're going to discount, you carry very few items. If you're going to carry a big selection, you charge higher prices. Lazarus said, no, I'm going to do both, big selection, low prices. And it did work. He was getting market shares of over 50%, even in big metropolitan areas like Chicago and Los Angeles. He was selling over half the toys in those markets. And that's like a market share to die for. I mean, Walmart would give their right arm to get a 50 in any decent-sized metropolitan area. And I saw that technology and said, that's not going to just stay bottled up in the toy business. That's going to sweep through all forms of retailing. So my next question is, what are people going to be buying in the next 20 years? And again, I'm looking at it from the 1970s, looking in the 80s and 90s. And basically, most business and economics goes back to demographics. Read the great Peter Drucker. He just talks over and over and over again about the power of demographics. Well, I looked at the demographics in the 70s, the baby boom. I'm one of them. We're the biggest generation in U.S. history, the best educated generation in U.S. history. And I wanted to be selling whatever the baby boom was going to be buying. And when I looked at it, you really do two things. You look at what's age-related, just things that will happen to them as they age, like they'll get married and have kids and move to the suburbs and whatever. And then other things that were unique about that generation. In the case of the baby boom, I thought we'd be lifelong readers and learners because of the educational level. I also thought we'd be more into music and movies than previous adult generations had been. From all that, I said, look, the opportunities in superstores are books, records, toys, sporting goods, auto parts, and home improvement. If I can bring a superstar into one of those, I'll do it. Now, Toys R Us already existed. That was my model. You'll hear this thing about first mover advantage. Whoever goes first wins. Well, that's bullshit. Very few great companies are first. You know, Walmart was not first at hardly anything. Microsoft was not first at hardly anything. What matters is being best. Now, if you can be best and be first, go for it. There just aren't many examples of that. Probably the greatest example is Federal Express, where Fred Smith dreamed that up as a college paper and fine-tuned the idea, almost didn't make it repeatedly, And I believe he's the greatest living, active American entrepreneur. He's 67 years old. He runs a $35 billion company, and he invented an industry. Didn't be first and best, go for it. But the key is to be best. But I looked at toys and I said, no, I don't want to go up against them in the toy business because they are really good at it. They really have a passion for it. And when I looked around, I didn't know how to fix a car, build a house. I knew how to read books. And like was said, I live in a library with 50,000 plus books. So I said, I'm going to bring the Superstore idea to books. Well, then I spent the next, after I decided to do the book Superstore, I spent the next 7 years becoming an expert in the book industry and learning everything I could. And at the end of that process, 6 years into the 7-year process, I attended the American Booksellers Convention, the big trade show. In fact, I'll be giving a talk there in 3 weeks in New York. And I went in and they had a workshop on the future of bookstores in America. And I said, well, that's where they're going to be talking about the book Superstore. Because by then I was absolutely convinced, it was like written in stone, there are going to be these giant discount big selection bookstores all over the United States, and ultimately all over the world. And that if I tried to make it work and I failed, it would be because I screwed up, not because it was a bad idea. It was just, if you just studied the demographics and looked at your numbers and you studied retail trends, it was just going to happen. So I go to this, there's a workshop, the future bookstores in America. I said, well, that's where they're going to be talking about the book Superstore. And I went in, I sat in there, it's like a 1-hour seminar, 55 minutes into it, no mention of the coming of the book Superstore. They're talking about Book of the Month Club, which have been around since the 30s. They're talking about Sam's and Costco and Price Club, which strategically is the opposite of a Superstore. And I'm like, what's wrong with these people? You know, it's like they're standing on the track looking for the future to come and the train's coming from the other direction. And I'm the first more or less to get slammed in the back of the head. I thought, are they stupid? No, they weren't stupid. They had high IQs. They all read a lot. Still love hanging out with booksellers. All I can figure out is they're kind of parochial. They live in their own little world. 52 weeks, 51 weeks of the year, they hang out in their bookstore. The 1 week of the year, they get out of there, they go to the bookstore convention and hang out with 30,000 other booksellers. They've never been to a toy store. They've never been to a Toys R Us. Or they've never taken a second to think about the implications for it in their industry. Now, one of the things, if you study innovation, the vast majority of great innovations come from just seeing two things that people see every day and combining them in a new way. There's a great, a recent book out called The Innovator's DNA by Clayton Christensen from Harvard and a couple other guys. And they interviewed Michael Dell and Jeff Bezos and Amazon, all these people. And the overarching thing they came to was something I put in my book 10 years ago, which is just combine two things. Well, bookstore and the Toys R Us, you know, the Superstore idea. And all I knew for sure about all those booksellers was I was blessed to pick an industry to revolutionize where they're all fast asleep. Well, now I've gone on to 3 more industries. I keep ideas. I started keeping a list of business ideas when I was a kid. I now have, this is tablet number 193. I have about 210 ideas for new businesses. And I've studied a lot of industries. And my conclusion now is that the most so-called industry leaders have their head in the sand. They're so caught up in their internal politics and in the old myths and superstitions. I can assure you, when I go to New York to the Booksellers Convention, I'll hear some of the same stupid myths and superstitions that I first heard in 1981 at that same convention. It is amazing the lengths people will go to not let the facts interfere with their own beliefs. So the thing is, though, the bottom line on that is that those people in the bookstore industry, because when I went around and told everybody, because man, I talk to everybody, I'm not a person who believes in keeping your ideas secret, I don't sign NDAs, don't ask people to sign non-disclosure agreements. I could take my 210 ideas and Xerox them and drop them out of helicopters over Austin and never lose any sleep about them being stolen because other people can't see your idea. But I tried to convince all the New York publishers and the big wholesale companies, and they all thought I was crazy. Why would America ever need another bookstore? How could you ever compete with B. Dalton and Walden books? They're just too powerful. Same kind of nonsense you hear about Walmart today. In any case, the bottom line is these people were not fundamentally curious. They didn't have a driving desire to be a lifelong learner. My rule is there's nobody on earth I can't learn something from. Now, you sit down on a plane next to me going to Europe, you think you're going to read a novel, you got another thing coming, you know? Because I got questions for you, and I got tablets, you know? There's more where that one came from. So the first thing, and I put extra emphasis on it, so important, being curious, asking questions. Next thing on my list, what are you curious about? People who build great enterprises have a sense of history. And there I really mean two things. One is looking at trends, and the other is learning the lessons of history. Guys, one of the biggest things to affect us retailers over the last 50 years has been the entry of women into the workforce. If I'd been speaking to a Chamber of Commerce 100 years ago, there wouldn't be many women in the room. That's all changed. One of the implications is people no longer shop Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. They shop nights, they shop weekends, they shop lunch hour because everybody's at work. Well, the U.S. banking industry hired hundreds of thousands of women who never noticed women had gone to work. U.S. travel agency industry, 62% of the people in it are women. They never noticed women had gone to work. You still can't buy a Disney package or a cruise on a Sunday afternoon or a Thursday night. The long-hour travel agents in most American cities means they're open Saturday till 2 p.m. Well, the peak of the retail week is 2 to 5 p.m. Saturday. So they close just as people are getting their wallets out. Not everybody missed it. H-E-B noticed the long hours and everything else. But these kind of trends, part of it, I think, is that the journalists don't pick up on them because journalists are good at reporting on events and news, but not on long-term trends. It's like journalists are good at reporting on tsunamis, but not good at reporting on plate tectonics, the stuff going on underneath that causes the tsunamis. Well, in business, demographics is the plate tectonics, demographics and social trends. And you know, there was never a day when the Austin American-Statesman said, this morning at 9 a.m., 51% of all Williamson County women are at work, you know? And so people miss those trends. But they change everything. And companies die, fortunes are lost, and new fortunes and companies are created. Fun game to play. What's the next big thing coming up? Well, the baby boom. We're still here. You know, the clothing guys are still doing buttons. It's going to be Velcro time here pretty soon. We're going to get arthritis. Enormous opportunities in serving an aging baby boom. And most of corporate America is just totally ignoring it. We continue our worship of youth, which I understand too, but huge opportunities. And then the other big thing is the Latinization of America. We're up to around every 7th American is of Hispanic origin. Between now and 2050, the U.S. will add something like 500,000 white non-Hispanics. We will add 74 million Hispanic people in this country. And that's assuming a low rate of immigration. That's the Census Bureau's low immigration projection. So this is going to become a Latin country. And I actually worked very hard. I gave a speech at South by Southwest called Why Mexico Can Change Your Life. And I'm beginning lead tours down in Mexico. Mexico City is probably the greatest unknown city in the world, unknown by Americans. And it's safe, it's clean, it has half the murder rate of Dallas or Houston, has more museums than Paris, London, or New York, and it's a bargain. Just an amazing place. But I'll come back to geography in a minute. The thing is, looking at those trends, every industry, every community's got trends at work, and so noticing those trends and playing into them. How do you serve this aging baby boom or the expanding Hispanic market or whatever? The other thing is learning the lessons of history. Nothing that matters in business is new. All the basics about human nature and how you serve customers, it's been done over and over again, and yet we have almost no sense of history in the business world. Even lawyers have got to study precedent and all that. Doctors have got to study the Hippocratic Oath. Business people, the greatest manager in history, a guy named Alfred P. Sloan, the guy that built General Motors. Bill Gates says if you're going to read one book about business, his book, My Years with General Motors, is the book to read. And yet I've met with General Motors managers who don't really know about the guy. You know, you look at the issues that face all these high-tech companies, hardware and software companies, issues like, well, when we plan our future, should we listen to the engineers or listen to Wall Street? Should we make just one product and a gazillion of them, or a big, broad product line customized for every customer? Does the product, should it just like do the job and be clunky, or should it look cool? Should it be well designed? I have a list on my computer, something like 30 questions like that. Every single one of those questions was dealt with between 1910 and 1930 by Walter P. Chrysler, Henry Ford, and Alfred P. Sloan, the GM guy. Not that the answers today would always be the same, but often they are. And even when they are, there is so much to be learned from the greats. And so that, tying into what Doug mentioned, is this evening I'm giving a talk that's co-sponsored by the Chamber here and the World Entrepreneurs and Williamson County Entrepreneurs Network. called The Rise of the Computer Industry. And it's over at Flick's Brew House at Hester's Crossing and I-35. 7 o'clock tonight is a talk, 7 to 8, and then a half-hour discussion. But you're going to show up early and eat. The Flick's people would appreciate that. And I do use, because there I've got a big screen, and it's, guys, 150 images showing you the evolution of the computer and the people who gave us the computer industry. A lot of stuff about IBM. When I was at UT Austin, I gave 5 talks on 5 different industries. And so it should be fun, because there I'll have like a 40-foot screen. And I invite you, you can go to Eventbrite, B-R-I-T-E, is a place where you can go register. It's like $12, but if you type in chamber as your discount code, it's $6. And you can show up at the door too. So anyway, I invite you to come, but there's just so much we learn from history. So the bottom line on all the history thing, you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you're coming from. And we just are always firing off in the future and making the same mistakes over and over again that I believe cost our society hundreds of billions of dollars a year. So history. Third thing, people who build great enterprises understand geography. In fact, I remember a meet with somebody. They'd flown into town to meet with Michael Dell and had dinner with him. And I said, well, what was he like and everything? And at that point, I hadn't yet met him. And they said, oh, man, he knew more about China than anybody I've ever met. You know, California is our biggest state, 35 million people or so. If it were a province of China, it'd be the 19th biggest province of China. Now, they know what? They know Dallas and Houston. They probably know Round Rock because of Dell. We don't know. I don't know all those 19 provinces. But just as much as knowing what's going on around the world, India, China, whatever, it's knowing what's going on right under our nose. Where are there opportunities in Lockhart? Where are there opportunities in Taylor? What's going to be happening to Fredericksburg and Kerrville? I really believe that over the next 40 years, Austin and San Antonio will grow together. And my number is in the year 2050, the population will be around 7.2 million, which will make us 11th biggest in the nation and pass up Philadelphia. But at that point, San Marcos and New Braunfels look really good, you know. But the thing will be enormous. I mean, Round Rock will be almost downtown Austin by then, you know. You just keep watching that evolution. Study history, study geography. I believe great breakthrough ideas come from that curiosity and, funny way to phrase it, knowing what's going on around you, your context, knowing where you're at in time and space. To have some idea of what's going before you and what's coming after you in time, and know what's going on around you in space. With that foundation, great enterprises have a vision or a mission, I use those interchangeably, that has 4 attributes, and these are 4 of mine: clear, consistent, serving, and unique. So clarity of vision, just plain English. Kill the buzzwords, kill the acronyms, don't use any alphabets again in your life. You know, we waste so much energy and so much, it costs our society a fortune because we don't understand each other. And we take all these shortcuts. You study maybe the clearest vision company in America, Southwest Airlines. Okay, we fly one kind of plane, so it's easy to check out the flight crews on all the same kind of plane. And we have a limited investment in spare parts. We land in a hurry, first come, first served, get the seats. We throw peanuts at you, tell you a joke, and take off in a hurry. Well, any third grader could understand that. I call it a third grade vision, which means every baggage handler, every flight attendant, every CFO, every senior vice president of marketing, and even poor old wild turkey drinking, chain smoking Herb Kelleher can understand it. Most of the people that cloned Southwest Airlines failed, and almost all of them had much more complex visions. They couldn't even Xerox, right? They said it can't be that simple. But it is that simple. And great enterprises have crystal clear messages that everybody that touches that enterprise understands. Their employees, their suppliers, their customers, their community. So clarity. Second thing, consistency. More enterprises fail because they change than because they don't change. Now that sounds a little weird in this era, who moved my cheese, and change, change, change. And I believe I'm an agent of change. But what I'm talking about is once you figure out what you're doing, that may take a while if you're a startup. Once you figure out what you're good at and what you love to do, then focusing on it. You study Boeing. They were America's biggest exporter, biggest airliner maker in the world. They lost their way. They moved from Seattle, the headquarters. They left the plants in Seattle, moved the headquarters to Chicago. They said we're a services company, not a manufacturing company. They were always a very ethical company. All of a sudden they're being investigated by Washington for cheating on defense contract stuff. They lost their way. They forgot their purpose, what mattered. And in the midst of that, that company became the second biggest airliner maker in the world. A consortium of European socialist governments passed them up with Airbus. You would have told me I was going to have, I would tell you, man, you're smoking dope. That's just crazy. And then, finally, they got rid of the idiot that was running Boeing, and now the guy, he's turned it around, and he wrote a book called You Can't Order Change. And now Boeing is back on top, the #1, and what they should have been all along. But they wasted billions of dollars of shareholder value and losing track. The contrasting case is Caterpillar. Every reason on earth to move to Chicago. They're based in Peoria, Illinois. It's got to be easier to recruit management, easier to fly in and out at O'Hare. And maybe Wall Street thinks it's sexier to be a services company. But Caterpillar says, no, we are a Peoria company. We make big yellow stuff, and that's all we know how to do, and we like doing it, and we're sticking to it. I'm not saying they rest on their laurels. They're one of the most progressive companies on earth. But if you look at that stock, last I looked, she's up around 110. She has consistently been one of the 2 or 3 best performing stocks in the Dow Jones average. It is an amazing company. Doesn't make a lot of headlines. When people talk about American manufacturing, they don't mention Caterpillar. They don't mention John Deere, founded in 1837, stronger today than any time in its history. They don't talk about Packard, P-A-C-C-A-R, the Seattle-based company that makes Peterbilt and Kenworth trucks. Their biggest plant's in Denton, Texas. That company made $1 billion after taxes last year. In the automotive industry, the Germans have to price their products 20% below the American company because the Germans cannot make quality that compares with the American company. When they're run right, when they're run with the right visions, you can't beat them. So, clarity and consistency of vision. What is it you believe in? What is you good at? And are you willing to put your neck on the line? So what is the purpose of an enterprise? Actually, Milton Friedman, with whom I agree on virtually everything, said the purpose of an enterprise is to make a profit. I don't believe that. I believe that's like saying your purpose is to carry your heart around. You can't survive without your heart, and an enterprise can't survive without a profit. So I absolutely believe in the profit system. In fact, I think it's every bit as important for nonprofits as for-profits. Find me a museum, a university, a hospital that spends more money every day than it takes in, and it ain't going to be around. They just use different terms, surplus and all that. Profit is as important to an enterprise's life as your heart is to you, but that's not why you were put here. You have some greater purpose, and you won the awards. I don't know if that's your only purpose, or hopefully there's more to go on to, right? The only valid purpose for any enterprise, for-profit or not-for-profit, is to provide goods and services to people, to somehow make the world a better place. And the minute an enterprise forgets that, it's over with. Now, it may take years to do downhill, like Oral Sears, but, and in fact, the most vivid story in my mind illustrates this is the rise of Walmart. So I got out of college. I knew I wanted to start a retail chain. I had to figure out what kind. And a friend of mine said, go to Wall Street to pick retail stocks. Work for a big, institutional investor. And I was lucky, and they got 22 interviews. They don't teach you how to interview in Milton Friedman's class. 22 interviews, and I got one job offer, and it was at Citibank, which at that point was a great outfit, run by a visionary. He's got to be rolling in his grave with what they did to his company since then. But so I joined an old veteran analyst, Pete Wetzel. He's one of the top analysts on Wall Street, and he picked the retail stocks, and I was his assistant, young analyst. And Pete covered our 3 big investments, Sears, Penny, and Kmart. And he came into my office one day. I covered Bloomingdale's, Radio Shack, Macy's, Dillard's, Safeway, all the other, a lot of the other retail industries. Pete comes to my office one day and he says, Gary, the bosses have given us a budget to hire a summer intern. To take somebody between the 2 years of their MBA program and come in and look at some little segment of retailing, some segment that's so small, not only is it not worth Pete's time to look at, it's not even worth Gary, the new kid on the block's time to look at. But some segment of retailing where maybe someday the companies in it will get big and we can buy stock in them, because it's hard for a big institutional investor to buy stock in small capitalization companies. Or have a company in it that'll get big enough that it might compete with Sears and Penny. Gary, do you think we should have a summer intern come in there? And they would work for you, Gary, so you get some management experience. Gary, do you think we should bring a summer intern to look at the regional discount store chain industry? There were like 15 of these little companies. Alco Duckwall, Kunzbig K, Walmart, FedMart, Caldor, More Value, Alco, Duckwall, Kamida, 10 or 15 of these little companies. The biggest one was 1/50th as big as Sears, and 1/50th as big as Kmart. He said, Gary, don't think about it, let's get back together a couple of days. Besides, we get back together, the best and the brightest. We loved retailing, we knew retailing. We got back together and said, no. It's not even worth our time to have somebody go look at this. I mean, come on, this wall, whatever it is, Bentonville, Arkansas, if they ever go up against Kmart or Sears in a big city, there'll be blood all over the wall, all those unemployed Walmart people, Sears and Kmart stock will be going up. Our boss will say, you idiot, you bought that wall stock, you're out of there. I don't have to tell you we're wrong. Probably don't have to tell you that Walter F. Loeb, the only Wall Street analyst who had even met Sam Walton, became independently wealthy and left Morgan Stanley to start his own firm because he was the guy who discovered Walmart. This was 1973, so Walmart was 11 years old. Walmart, Kmart, and Target all opened their first stores in the same year, 1962. But Walmart was a much smaller company. It wasn't even among the 30 biggest discount store chains. So what did we miss? Because I'd like to think if we sent an intern down and they'd met Sam Walton, we would have been saying, well, this guy's got something going on. Let's study it some more. What did we miss? So take everything that's in favor in 1973, Sears Roebuck, the world's biggest, most profitable retailer, 73, everything is in favor of Walmart. Take any good management book, business school book you can find, and go down the list of what makes her a great company. So which company had more experienced executives? Sears. Which company had better brand recognition with the consumer? Brand equity, they call it now. Sears, Cold Spot, Kenmore, Craftsman Tools. Nobody knew Old Roy Dog Food. Which company had better human resources? Sears. Better training? Sears. Better computers? Sears. Better information systems? Sears. Better supply chain management. Everybody writes all these books like Walmart invented supply chain management. No, 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 no. Richard Sears invented supply chain management. Sears was doing supply chain management in their sleep in the 50s and 60s before Walmart existed. Which company had better real estate to keep back the retail success? Sears. Which company paid less for that real estate? Sears. Which company paid less for merchandise? Or glass. Think of this as an iced tea glass. You know, you'll read today, try to sell glassware at Walmart, and they'll say, sell that to us below your cost, or we'll burn your plant down, or you'll never sell in Bentonville again, or whatever. Well, we can talk separately about Walmart today. I'm talking about how they got where they got. The reason that's got to be an iced tea glass, my dad was a salesman. They sold iced tea glasses and ashtrays and all that jazz. And he and all his competitors were literally sleeping in the aisle at Troy, Michigan, suburban Detroit, where the Kmart buyers were, and on Homan Avenue on the west side of Chicago, where the Sears buyers were, because both those companies were buying glassware by the boxcar load. It's before that kind of freight all moved to trucks. And the Pennsylvania Railroad would back up boxcars to the glass factory and sell like $2–3 million per year to each of those outfits. Walmart was buying stuff by the case lot, 144 at a time. My dad and his competitors, none of them were bothering to call on Walmart. You know, Walmart could call in their own orders if they wanted, you know. In 1973, there wasn't a single item on the shelves of Walmart where Walmart paid less for it than what Sears and Kmart paid for the same item. So you go on and on and on. What makes a great company? 1973, not a single thing on Walmart's side of the balance sheet. Every single thing you're supposed to look for was in Sears' favor. What changed? Because at that point, Walmart was 1/50th the size of Sears, 1/50th the size of Kmart, so it was 100th as big as the two of them combined. Last year, Walmart was 7 times as big as Sears and Kmart combined. So it's a 701 flip. What happened? What happened when Sears took its eye off the customer? Built the world's tallest building, a real tribute to the customer, huh? Bought Coldwell Banker, we're going to go into real estate. Bought Dean Witter, we're going to become a stockbrokerage office. And I did meet the people who ran Sears. We were one of their biggest stockholders. That board of directors had to be saying to themselves, look, we can run stores in our sleep. We don't have to worry about that anymore. We are the world's greatest, biggest, most profitable retailer, best run retailer. Read about it in the magazines. Everybody knows we're the best run retailer on earth. And they were. But man, they took their eye off the customer. And it was the wrong time to do it. Because Sam Walton was absolutely obsessed with how can I make life better for my friends and neighbors. Every decision he made, read his book, Made in America, every decision he made was based on how does this affect. Say, we've got a single mom with 2 screaming kids. She's in our Cape Charter, Missouri store, 10 minutes before closing. She's buying 3 pairs of socks. She's going to save $1 and use that dollar to buy gas to take the kids to school the next day. How does this decision about the accounting system affect her? How does this decision about what kind of trucks we buy affect her? How does this decision about how the store is organized affect her? Every decision he made was obsessed with the customer. And in the face of that, Sears was powerless. They probably could have turned it around. It's too late now. The people who own the thing, Eddie Lampert, appears to me just be destroying it. The thing is, people think there's power in Washington and power at Goldman Sachs and power on Wall Street. They are taking their eye off the ball. The power is in the hands of whoever writes you that check or hands you that Visa card. You know, it's the customers. And it's so, I think, all I can figure out, because the story I just told about Sears and Walmart, I could tell the same story about General Motors and Toyota. I could tell the same story in the 80s and 90s about the decline of IBM. Luckily, they saved that one and brought it back from the grave. Talk a lot about it tonight. You see the same pattern over and over again. So, clear, consistent, serving others, and the fourth thing is unique. Two enterprises can't stand in the same spot at the same time. Two people can't stand in the same place. You have to have your own vision. And for a lot of these things, I'm talking about Apple is a great case. Look at how unique Apple is. And it ain't about technology. You know, Apple did not have any better scientists than Dell or HP or Acer or IBM or anybody else. What Apple had was a vision that was obsessed with what's it like to be a user. What's it like to be a customer? What's that experience like? And man, they just have blown the rest of the industry away in any category they wanted, you know. Clear, consistent, serving, and unique. And the last of my things is passion. Find me somebody who's built a great, lasting enterprise who didn't love what they were doing. And that's one of the biggest challenges when I work with the young people and the students, is they think, oh, I'll go into social media because it'll make me rich or whatever. And they come into my office when they have the office UT, and they come in and they trip over the carpet that wouldn't stay nailed down. They write on the whiteboard that's impossible to erase to get the gray off there. They sit in the chair that rock back and forth. And they're all the time saying, I'm going to create the next YouTube and the next Facebook. And they're just reaching so hard. And they cross $600 or $700 million opportunities just walk into my office and never see one of them. A room like this probably has, this is a little different room. Let's look around a little bit. There's probably 20 ways to create a $100 million business in this room over the next 10 years. The opportunities are everywhere, and people just go through their lives with their eyes closed. So find something you love. I mean, I always use the case James Dyson, the greatest vacuum cleaner guy. There was nobody on earth that said to him as a young man, the way you're going to become a billionaire and collect castles someday is make a better vacuum cleaner. You know, and if you visited Hoover and Eureka and all those dudes, Electrolux, they would have said, well, hey, if anybody invents a better vacuum cleaner, it's going to be us. We've got a building over there with 100 engineers in it working on the vacuum cleaner of the future. Who are you? No, it's what do you love doing, and how can you find that sweet spot where what you love doing really serves real needs or desires, even if they're latent and not real apparent, real needs and desires of real people. Will they love what you do when you come out with it, and will you love it? So that's, oh gosh, I used up most time, but I'm to take some questions or whatever works for you folks, huh? At your mercy. Anybody got a question? Just stunned, huh? Now come tonight, it's going to be a lot more fun tonight because I got pictures tonight. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Since we started off with books, so I just had a question about that. What do you see as the future of the retail business? Is it all going online? Is it, or stores like Best Buy are closing down because people don't want to go there anymore? Mm-hmm. So you want to talk about?
Yeah, no. As far as online versus bricks and mortar retailing, online. The question is the future of retailing with the rise of the internet. Online retailing and what we call non-store selling, so it actually includes vending machines and mail order, that held at about 5% for ages and ages. As even as Amazon was rising up, Sears closed their $1 billion-plus catalog operation. So you had some people dying, other people rising. Now it's begun to creep up, and we're up to about 7% of U.S. merchandise is sold online, and catalog and vending machines. But most of it and all the growth is online. Although mail order is still bigger than you realize, but all the good mail order operators integrate the two. And of course, most of the big bricks and mortar people are doing what they call multi-channel, where they're, Walmart.com and Staples.com, and those are among the biggest, websites for selling merchandise. You know, my wild ass guess would be in 20 years, we'll be at 20% of merchandise will be sold online. You really have to look at each category of merchandise. Like if I own a gas station, I'm not really worried about the online gas station. And for 5 years, I was on the board of a little called Whole Foods Market. And my friend John Mackin founded that. He doesn't lose a lot of sleep worrying about online. I think Aristotle said man is a social animal. People don't want to stay home and do everything, you know. And obviously the restaurant business, you know, the recession's hit it like everything else. But if you look at the long-term numbers, the restaurant business is just a machine. I mean, in terms of growth, a huge category, continues to grow faster than the overall economy. And grocery stores actually is the slowest growing major category in merchandise because they're losing out to the restaurants. So I think it depends on what you're selling. But yeah, I mean, Best Buy, you know, first of all, everything in media is being digitized. Movies, music, books, newspapers, magazines. That's a nightmare for all the existing players, and a lot of them will not survive. But there will be new companies start up, including people that start new newspapers, paper and ink newspapers, and new book publishers, but there'll be little innovative people. A lot of the big guys won't survive. That's just a huge amount of turmoil. And at poor Best Buy, I mean, how can you win when the products you sell go down in price every year? So you got to sell even more to stay flat in revenue. And then the vendors really don't give a rat's ass about you. I mean, you have the computer you bought from me last month, and now I introduce a new one that's twice as good. Well, that's your problem. You know, it's not like the vendor's going to step in and give you markdown money like Ralph Lauren would give to a department store, you know. And then it's all sales tax free and shipped overnight from the New York guys and the big guys. It's just it's always been. Before Best Buy, there was Circuit City. Before that, there was Highland Superstores. Before that, there was Frisco Electronics. There was a Federated Group. Over and over, because I used to own stock in some of them, and finally realized, well, it's like Warren Buffett with airlines. It's just not, that's just a tough industry. Best Buy was run by brilliant people. Another question? Yes?
Larry, what can you tell us about your current endeavors in terms of educating, teaching entrepreneurship?
Yeah. Well, I found out I wasn't really brought into UT to teach. I was a guidance counselor to entrepreneur wannabes. I probably looked at 5,000 or 10,000 business plans total, like 200 or 300 during the year I was there. But it ended up, there was a night school, University Extension, entrepreneurship course. It was in the catalog, nobody ever taught it. And I tried it and found I loved teaching. And my entrepreneur in residence was just a one-year stint, the third person. I was the first one, but they now do one every year. And so I started my own little Hoover Academy, and I give a 12-week course. I think it's going to be $599. I think it'll be every Tuesday night starting in late June, mid to late June. I'll put up the announcement actually in the next couple of days. I just booked the rooms for it. It's in Northwest Austin. It's near Mopac 183. I have given a 4-hour course for high school kids. I've worked with high school students through the Austin Rotary and their Camp Enterprise for years. I offer a course, a 3-session course called Understanding Companies. And it includes how to read financial statements and everything. But the third of the 3 sessions is how to become an expert in any company or industry. Because my whole life's been about research, and that's what led to Hoover's. So I can show people how to really move fast and become an expert in an industry without spending any money, without subscribing to Hoover's, actually. And you ought to be able to go in and call on a company, know more about the company than the person sitting across the desk from me that works there. It ain't that hard. So that's been a real popular course, both for entrepreneurs and salespeople. And that's usually 1 day a week, 3 weeks in a row for like $199 for all 3 of them. And doing more and more of these history talks, but those are more, I don't charge much for those. So those are some of the things, and I hope to start offering online courses in the next 60 days. But that's really just a way to get bigger, generate more revenue. I enjoy looking my students in the eyes. And when I say students, my average student is probably 40, 45 years of age. They're aged from 12 to 70. So some of them have already got an MBA or 2. One guy had already sold his company for like $15 million. So it isn't just beginners. You know, it's all types of people that really want to learn to think entrepreneurially. So, and also nonprofit and social entrepreneurship is part of the team. So those, and then I've got like 65 or 66 YouTube videos that are free that include a lot of my lessons. The links on the business card. Yes, sir.
I love your enthusiasm and passion. Give me advice on how you keep that passion, like good times, bad times, how you kind of keep pushing through.
Yeah, keeping your passion through good times and bad times. You know, bad times, and I lost all my money on my third venture, a thing called Travel Fest. I borrowed $1 million personally, took myself off the payroll, and borrowed the day home equity loans, became legal in Texas, took $300,000, put it in the payroll account against my house. So I had like $9,000 a month house payment, no income, and that didn't work. I never declared bankruptcy. I don't really believe in that if you can avoid it. But I sure came close and sold the stores at a big loss, and the buyer was able to make them last one more year. It was a thing called Travel Fest, and the airlines stopped paying commissions on airline tickets. Is what happened to us. You know, it's human nature to mope. It's really more a matter if you mope for an hour, a day, a week, a month, or a year, right? How long does it take to pick yourself back up? And I tend to believe anybody that does something bold, you're going to have these huge disappointments. I mean, there's never been a movie star where all their movies were hits, right? Even the biggest movie stars have had bombs, the biggest directors. Even, there's no athlete that's won every game, right? And sometimes you look at them and say, boy, how can they come back, you know, from that awful performance? You know, in your gut, there's this self-confidence and there's this flame, there's this fire. And I believe that self-confidence comes from doing that homework, doing that research. You know, when my mom said, Gary, you're the youngest vice president of the May Department Stores Company, 29 years old, you're going to quit and start this bookstore chain. How can you take such a high risk? Well, I think if you study all the great entrepreneurs and even little guys like me, we don't think it's a risk. Entrepreneurs don't like risk. We do everything in our power to mitigate, reduce risk. I knew that the May Department Stores Company was what I call post-peak. When I gave the course Understanding Companies, we talk about companies that are either on the rise at maturity or on the way down. And that's the first thing I wanted to figure out about a company. Well, and it's not always easy. Well, the May Company, you know, it took them 20 years, but it doesn't exist anymore. And the whole headquarters operation where I worked is vamoosed, you know, gone. And I knew the May Company was not going to be around forever, and the department store industry in total is post-peak. You know, the guys that bought them, Macy's, a great, good company, but it's not the future. On the other hand, I knew these giant bookstores would be built all over the world, whether I did it or somebody else did. I knew that. I'd done my homework. So that kind of confidence. I mean, when I had a bad day at Bookstop, there's days when you're calling up your investors and asking them to Federal Express checks to cover payroll. I remember one time our CFO had to drive around to all the stores and take all the money out of the cash registers, because if we waited until the 3 o'clock Brinks truck, the money would have gotten to the bank too late to cover payroll. So he ran around in his car and emptied all the tills and ran it to the bank by 2 o'clock or whatever. Now, you have some awful days as an entrepreneur. I know Michael Dell. They almost died like 3 times. The way I would stop at a bookstore on the way home at a bookstop and wait on customers. And that's when it reminded me, hey, I'm doing this for a reason. You know, I'm right, you know, and we're right, and I'm going to help this person find a book, and then I can go home and sleep like a baby. Close. One more question? Thank you all so much. I encourage you to email me. I tell all my students they get free lifetime 24/7 email support. Now that's my lifetime, not your lifetime. I'm going to come back from the grave. Thank you for your time and for hanging out late with me. And I'll see you tomorrow.